The European Union has voted in favour of taking a punitive measure against Hungary for not abiding by its core values. In a big blow to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, for the first time ever, the European Union passed a motion to trigger an Article 7 procedure against a member state. What does this mean? Hungary can now be stripped of its EU voting rights. This comes after 448 members of the European Parliament voted in favour of the Sargentini report. The report has been put together by a Dutch member of European Parliament, Judith Sargentini. It claims that Orban attacked his country's media, minorities and the rule of law. The report notes concerns about the lack of transparency in Hungary's electoral system and the lack of privacy and data protection. It further adds that there is neither freedom of expression nor the freedom of religion in Hungary. The report also expresses concerns about minorities there and claims that they have been denied their basic rights. The lack of fundamental rights to asylum seekers and refugees too has been highlighted. Meanwhile, Hungary hit back at the European Union. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó called the vote a petty revenge on part of the pro-immigration politicians.
This decision was made by violating the European treaties, as the votes regarding the absentees were not taken into consideration. So legally speaking, this decision goes totally against the procedures put forward in the European treaties. And it is absolutely obvious that this debate is about migration. There are forces in the European Parliament which basically hate the migratory policy of the current Hungarian government, and this is reflected in their decision.
On Tuesday, Hungarian Prime Minister Orban addressed the European Union Parliament in defence of his government. He said that European Union's threat of censure was nothing but blackmail. He said that the aim was to insult Hungary. Orban claimed that the Sargentini report was an instance of the Dutch member of European Parliament's abuse of power and that the report had some serious factual misrepresentation. Let's get in further details from Kevin Osbeck, Wion correspondent, joining us live from Brussels. Kevin, a host of issues which has resulted in EU slapping those unprecedented sanctions on Hungary, issues of rights of minorities, corruption, issue of immigration also. To what extent is immigration one of the reasons why EU slapped those sanctions?
Well, Hungary, and more specifically Viktor Orban's ruling party stance on immigration, really has a huge amount to do with this. And it's really been his stance on immigration that hasn't just raised eyebrows here in Brussels and in other capitals across Europe. It really has led to growing concern about Hungary stepping away from what can be considered and what truly are core EU values. In fact, just earlier this year, Viktor Orban's government passed a law that made it illegal for both attorneys as well as activists to help out asylum seekers in Hungary. So that is one of the things that really drew the European Parliament, or a majority of MEPs, I should say, to be more exact, to make that decision that they did yesterday to start the process of enacting Article 7.
What is the step forward for Hungary from here on?
So, of course, Viktor Orban has been speaking out against this, as well as his government. Hungary's foreign minister said today that this action from the European Parliament is, quote, petty revenge that's coming from pro-immigration bureaucrats here in Brussels and throughout Europe. Now, this is going to be a very long process for both the EU as well as Budapest. Viktor Orban's government is going to be able to respond to additional claims against the breakdown of the rule of law. Eventually, what is going to have to happen if Article 7 is going to be fully enacted is all 28 EU member states are going to have to sign off on stripping Hungary's voting rights away from it. that is very unlikely to happen, because even though Viktor Orban is a controversial figure, he does have allies that are in Warsaw, in Poland, another EU country that also is in the process of fighting an Article 7 process that has been put against it from the European Commission. So, of course, Poland would likely veto any stripping away of Hungary's voting rights, but still, this does send a pretty powerful message to Viktor Orban, and that message is that much of Europe is fed up with him.
All right, Kevin, thanks very much indeed for those details. But these developments and a host of those issues definitely call for an in-depth look into Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, his policies and what they really mean for Europe. Here's a detailed report.
He wasn't always a right-wing Christian conservative. In Fidesz, the party he helped found and which has seen him through the past 3 victories, was originally a liberal youth formation. But those who've been close to the Orban persona saw the transition based on what can be described as a thirst to remain in power. In the wake of a string of terrorist attacks on European soil, Orban was quick to see an opportunity to point fingers at immigrants. Nothing new in this diatribe, since many in Europe took the same stance. But where things were different for the Hungarian premier is in the constitution of his country. Of its roughly 10 million people, Hungary is largely homogeneous for many historical reasons. And despite more liberalism in the urban centres, closer to the capital city of Budapest, there is a core of rural Hungarians who are easily led to believe in the terrorism-immigration nexus, a rhetoric which was key to Orban's campaign.
Mondjátok el hát mindenkinek.
Tell everyone that mass migration threatens security. Mass migration increases the danger of terror. It is completely clear that mass migration leads to more incidents of rape, which puts the security of our women at risk.
Ott a nőket erőszakos támadások fenyegetik.
This discourse is reminiscent of that of US President Donald Trump. But that's not all, because much like Trump, one of Orban's solutions to migrants and asylum seekers is a wall. The only difference is that Orban has one. He built a 175-kilometer fence across the southern border with Serbia, after migrants fleeing war zones began transiting through Hungary. A move sharply criticized by the United Nations. But there's even more. As Europe tried to impose quotas to its members for the redistribution of asylum seekers, Viktor Orban rejected the policies. His leadership would not allow the EU to say who should be permitted beyond its borders. Orban's opponents believe the Hungarian leader is on an authoritarian path and that his stance on immigration has fueled xenophobia. With a message that he stands for all Hungarians against foreign meddling, Orban tapped into feelings shared by many Hungarians who perceive threats to their national identity and feel they are treated as second-class citizens in the EU. Viktor Orban's strong win could boost other right-wing nationalists in Central Europe, in Poland and in neighbouring Austria, and expose cracks in the 28-nation European Union. Arabella Sibelak, Wion.